how was the exercise lab? Is it difficult? So I don't think so. It's just basic and basic, the SQL practice. So based on that, I think what you have learned is okay. What you have learned in the exercise lab is I believe it's less than 10%, 5% of the entire SQL learning. So it's just motivation of your studying. So if you are interested in the database programming, definitely before you learn the database programming itself, you should learn how to use the SQL. Then you can access the data. To know the SQL, the best way is to practice. First, you need to create a sample database, then try to several the major functions or the functionality used in the SQL Plus. Then, after you are familiar with using SQL, then you can learn the SQL Plus. SQL Plus is the specific function used in the Oracle application. If you are using the different database management system like Informix provide another interface to use the database. It's called the DB Access. DB Access is the SQL tool, just like the SQL Plus in Oracle. Also, for example, IBM DB2 is a relational database management system. It's very popular. They provide the SQL application as the DB2. So if you type the DB2 after you install DB2 product, you can use the DB2 is the just same the SQL Plus in Oracle. That's the DB2 application. Then after you got familiar with the SQL Plus, there are not much application that access the database via SQL application. Like a SQL long time ago, before the client server environment was getting popular, there are some application or project or the system that access the database directly from the SQL application, like the SQL Plus. So to do that, most of employees should know how to use the SQL Plus as well as the SQL itself. That is the reason if you look at some options used in SQL Plus, you can see a bunch of options that can format the report, like the width and length and page size, also header, footer. Even you can make is there anybody who use the legacy system or the mainframe system? There are still some companies who use the legacy system. Legacy system means it's centralized system. You have one big machine, then the programmer or employee may have the dummy terminal. It's not the PC. Even though you are using PC, in the PC there is a terminal, dummy terminal application. Okay, then through that dummy terminal you can access the centralized system. At that time, to get the report like the student list, including the GPA, you should program. Or in terms of the DBMS system, you should know how to use the SQL as well as the formatting, the command. Then you can get usually at the time, the dot printer is used. So every morning there are operators who check the printer, then give them print out to each department or each employee. Then, based on that, the reporter they can do their business. That's the oldest time. Right now, there are not much company who use the SQL application directly. Instead, definitely they have the application program, just like your project. I think today is the due date for the page 3. Page 3, the main purpose of the page 3 is, what is that? It's a SQL, right? But at the beginning of project, you already define some function or the menu, right? You need to implement. Using the SQL Plus or using the SQL, you cannot implement a very detailed or the fancy output. To do that, definitely in the page 4, you should use the program language like the C#, .NET, ASP, or somebody use a Power Builder or whatever. Using that program language, you can access the database. But we know the SQL, how to use. We know how to use the program language, suppose the ASP. Or ASP is not very good example, C language. Okay? But why do we need to know the 2 different languages to access the database? If there is only one language that can access the database, at the same time, if that program language allows the very nice interface or the GUI environment, we can use that program directly. But unfortunately, there is no such a program yet. Instead, we should know the both of them. SQL Plus is only for the accessing the data in database. Program language is the program language, just like other program language. Okay? So there is a gap, actually, between SQL and host program language. Sometimes we call those program language as a host language because that program language is running on the host server. It's not the database server, not the database. Okay? There is a gap between host language and SQL language. Huge gap, actually. Because of the gap, it's not that easy. Database programming, we sometimes separate the program skill used in the database as a database program language or database programming skill. So you can see the many job posting that requires 1 or 2 years database programming. That means even though you have a very good experience in the host language, for example Java, but if you do not have the skill to use the database, you cannot be involved in that project because you don't know how to use the database in the Java. Okay? The reason we call this kind of skill as database programming is since there is a huge gap between host language and SQL language, a person should reduce the gap, bridge the gap. How to do that? That is the purpose of the chapter 9. That gap is called impedance mismatch. Okay? We will check in the during the lecture what is the mismatch, what is the impedance mismatch between host language and SQL language. So this is a common question asked during the interview. What is the impedance mismatch in database program? What is that? So we will see that answer in this chapter. So main objective of the database programming is to access the database from not the SQL Plus or SQL application, but application program that's coded by the host language that you are familiar with, C++ or C, or there's C#, .NET, whatever that is. Why? Because the SQL Plus itself is not sufficient to support the very fancy GUI or the very complicated procedure. As you know, the SQL Plus itself is structured language, which means it's already outline is set up. There's no procedural logic. It's very hard to implement if then else or the for loop, while loop, something like that. So that is the reason we try to use the data host language or application program to access the database. So as I said, there is a gap between SQL and program language. We need to bridge it together. How to do that? First is embedded solution. Embedded means plugging one to the other. First solution is in the program language, we plug in. So SQL will be part of program language. That is the embedded solution. So I think you already know the name embedded C or embedded C++, embedded COBOL, or embedded Fortran, which means SQL is embedded to the C language. SQL is embedded into the C++. SQL is embedded in COBOL. So in Oracle, depending on the DBMS system, for example, Oracle used the different name. It's not embedded C, instead COBOL. There's a practice for example, for C++, for COBOL, and for Fortran, for something. That is the terms using only in Oracle. So if you ask it, so you know there's something embedded program, embedded C, something like that. So you ask it, how can I use the POSI in Informatics? That doesn't make sense. Okay, Informatics use different name. I cannot remember the exact name of that product. There's a embedded C or something like that. Anyway, use the different name. You can check from internet what kind of name in root they are using. Anyway, this is the only example in Oracle. So generally, we can say embedded C++, embedded something. Okay, how can we embed? So, for example, in the C POSI example, let's include and main and define and print F. There's a logic. This is a pure C program, right? No? Yes. This is a pure C program. Here, what do you do when you try to access the data from the database? What do you do? What do you need to do first time?
Include some.
First, you load the system. So there is a command exec SQL and exec. Begin exec and end exec. This is the block. We will see the exact command. So then in between, this is the area for SQL. This is the exec block, SQL block. So here you can connect, you can access the data and retrieve the data and add the exec command. So that is the reason. It's a plugging. The SQL part is plugging. The problem is, if you compile this program, this is called JDBC. If you compile this using the GNU or the NCC, can you compile it?
No.
No, definitely not. C compiler cannot understand the exec part. Probably you will get a bunch of error messages. First, before you compile this one, so we use different extension. Depending on the DBMS system, you will see different name of the extension. For example, the Oracle used the .pc. It's the short name of pre-POSI. But sometimes Informatics may use PREP or pre-control. I'm not quite sure. It has been a long time. This DBMS vendor used different name. Anyway, we use something .pc file. That includes the exec part. Okay? For the POSI++, we use the PCC. And COBOL, P-COBOL. Fortran, P-Fortran in Oracle. The other use different name. Can you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So sometimes, since the Oracle is very, very popular, that is the first market share vendor, so sometimes there are somebody who got confused with the general term and especially vendor term. Okay? If we use the POSI in other environments, that shows your lack of knowledge to others. Okay? Anyway, first you should make the .pc file pre-compilable the C file. So first we need to do is pre-compile. Pre-compile with what? There is a command for C. This is a Oracle command. Informatics may have different command, but their rule is the same. If you run this command, it compiles only this part, exec part. Then translate exec part to the pure C library. It's very important part. Even though there are many programmer, developer who has the experience for the embedded program, there are many developers who does not realize this mechanism. If you understand this mechanism, it's very easy to debug. Where is the problem? What is the problem? And how to solve the problem. Without knowing that, it's very hard to find whether this is error from the C or this is error from pure C. It's very hard. So this is very important part. For compiler, pre-compiler compile the exec block into the pure C program using the library. Who provides the library? Each vendor. Then I have a question. Why don't we use directly this library to access the data in the C program? It makes sense. Instead of using this one, why don't we use it? Very, very complicated. You can see the output of this pre-compiler is db.c file. It's a pure C file, including the SQL library provided by each vendor. But if you look at open this one, it's very, very complicated. You cannot understand the code. Okay? Since SQL is a standard, everybody knows how to use the SQL. So most of them are familiar with to use the SQL itself as it is, not this one. So that is the reason we use a pre-compiler, then translate the SQL part into the pure C part. Then we have the pure C program, then you can compile with C compiler. Then you can have the application program executor file by which you can access the database. You understand? The embedded program, that is the embedded approach. First one. The next one, as I said, it's very complicated to compile 2 times. Pre-compiler and post-compiler. Why don't we integrate? Just like what I mentioned here. So each vendor provides the object or library that can be directly used in the host program. That is called the library of the object-based approach or library-based approach. It's not the embedded program. The example is JDBC. When you use the JDBC, you don't have to compile for C program. You can directly use the Java C to compile it. But you should include the library provided by each vendor or standard, Java standard in some microsystem group. There are 2 types of the JDBC. JDBC is Java Database Connectivity. It's a library actually. The name is class 12.zip file or jar file, something like that, whatever that is. It's a group of the library, and this library includes how to access the data, how to log on the database, and how to run the SQL that you create, select from where. You don't have to pre-compile. There's a library. There are so many libraries to make then you make using the SQL library easily. Okay, that is the JDBC. There are two types of library. One is given by each vendor. So, in other words, the library given by the Oracle cannot be used for the library, the application for the Informix. Totally different. So you should use specific library. But there is another type of library that is the common standard. This library is the same throughout all the DBMS. As long as that DBMS follow the standard. We have learned the standard SQL 1, 2, 3, and SQL 92, 199. As long as they follow the standard, it's a common syntax. So who provides this one? Java Sun Group. Sun Java Group provides this. Which one is more powerful? Definitely each vendor provides more function. But all of them are not always standard. This is a standard. So we prefer this. This is called thin server. Thin. Okay? This one is, I forgot the name. There is a special name for each vendor, but thin server is more popular. So you don't have to learn for each vendor syntax. So the common syntax is enough to, which means if you create the a.java file to access the database, employee database, as long as the database includes the same database schema, Informix, Oracle, DBT, it doesn't matter. You can use the same class file without recompiling. You understand what I'm saying? But if you create the A class using this one, it will not be running on other DBMS. So that is the approach using library. A brand new full-fledged language, I don't know what he wants to say here. But anyway, there are two types of approach. Okay? So what is an impedance mismatch? So I already explained that there is a gap between the SQL and the host language, program that you are using. First difference is a variable, declared variable. Integer I in host language is different from the integer used in SQL, especially the string is totally different. In terms of even the C and Java, they are using different concept for the string. Without understanding, for example, the pointer, you cannot understand string. String is nothing but a pointer that point the address where the data is stored, something like that. Integer is different. It's not pointer itself. But SQL use the different data structure. So that is the gap. Okay? Another gap is actually how is the relational database proposed? What is the basic of the concept of a relational database? Where does it come from? It's a set theory. What is a relation? Relation is a set. Actually, so when you retrieve the data using SQL, the output is a set, a relation. Can you remember that? The output of the relational algebra is also relation. It's a set. Actually, the relation and set is a little bit different, but you can consider as a group or whatever that is. It's a group of tuples, something like that. Host language or any program language cannot handle directly a set. There's no language to handle the set or set directly. There's no language. Instead, there is a workaround like the array, okay, or for loop for each data. So that is the difference. So another difference is set versus record at the time processing. So host language, when you embed or when you use the object, that object definitely solves this problem. Time matching. Time matching is a kind of conversion. You can provide the comparability between among the data type. And set record, we will see how to handle those kind of the mismatch. So this is the key point, impedance mismatch. If you are asked what is impedance mismatch in database, you can say something like that. There's a gap between the database language, SQL, and host language, program language. For example, this kind of thing. As I said, the only way to access the relational database is through SQL. There is no other way to access the data. There might be variation of SQL, like the JDBC. Some object, actually those are based on SQL, structured query language, to support the using this one. So that caused the actual problem of the impedance mismatch. So these are the basic steps to do the database programming. First, you need to connect the database in your host program, in your Java program, in your C program, in your C++ program. First, you should connect the database. Without connection, no, there's no way to access the data. But host language, there's no concept of connection, right? For example, when you access the file in your current directory from your application C program, do you need to get the permission? No. As long as that owner of the execution file has the permission to access the file, you don't have to. That is the difference. So first, you should connect the program to this one. Excuse me, I really bit the barber. So if you need to discuss something, you can. I don't know. Sometimes I feel very clearly about your discussion. Sometimes not. So I don't want to blame you, but so I caring about the others. Okay. So the next thing is then you can do what you want after your connection. If you fail to connect the database, no, you cannot execute the layer. You will probably get the error message. The last one is after you are all set, then terminate or disconnect the connection. Okay. These are the basic steps. Any approaches in database programming address these the steps. So first, embedded SQL. There is a block exec SQL or exec and exec. Or sometimes you can use exec SQL begin and end. This is a block. So during the pre-compiling, if the pre-compiler needs this one, then find the object that can translate the exec, the SQL, into the host language. Okay? Actually, syntax may be vary depending on the operating system, but most of the case, for example, this is the in between exec begin exec and you can connect the server using this command. Connect to server name. What is the server name? Why don't you think about when you log on SQL, you provide username and password and one more thing. Host string. Sometimes it's called different names. Server name is one of them. That explains everything except the username, password, all the information about your connection is in that SQL string or the host string. I already show you the where you can find that information. Okay, it's in the Oracle home / the network / admin. You can find the file tnsnames.ora. There in that file, there's a configuration how to access it. You don't have to put all the information like the host name, IP address, port number, the protocol, and something like that. Instead, you can use that server name to access this one. When you disconnect, just disconnect. Is this the only unique syntax? No, there are variants. Sometimes you can use the username and password. Sometimes even like a set connection in one string, you can put every information. It depends on. We will see the example in the exercise lab. Okay? After you connect, first you need to declare the variable that is supposed to use in your database program, not the host program. Okay? This is the declaration part block only for your SQL, not the host. Host may use a different variable. So that is the reason variable character is a data type. If we type variable character in host part, host language or C program, for example here, it will return the error message. Then when pre-compiler needs this block, they will convert this variable into host program. If you are using C++, that pre-compiler find which one is comparable with variable character or int, integer. Also, after you declare, you can put the SQL statement that you created. For example, I'd like to retrieve the data, first name, last name, address, and salary from employee information. Whose information? Given social security number. So from your host language, you will get the input of the social security number. To do that, you can use semicolon here. Semicolon means is the variable in host language, but can be used for inside exe block. During the pre-compiler, probably pre-compiler does not touch anything about this one. Okay? Because it's given by the host somewhere above. Before this block, there might be input, the procedure to get the social security number. Also, another difference is into this one. F name, L name, address, salary. All of them has semicolon at the beginning. What's the difference? Is the same or different? Different. It's totally different. A semicolon means it's not the database variable. It's host variable. Your programming is the variable defined, declared in your host language. So for F name, you can use F1, L1, address, SA1, whatever name you use is fine. But this one, F name, L name, address, salary, should be the same as your database schema. Also, I got a little bit mistake. This is defined in declaration part. I got the mistake here. Then this one, it will be converted into the host variable. So this is defined and the declaration part. Then you can put some procedural part in EXEC block. We will discuss, we do not cover yet what is the procedural function in the SQL. That will be the procedure, PL SQL we will cover later, but we can use this kind of the procedure, if then else or for loop here. But the while loop, while and this one is a hosted language. It's not a part of the SQL. Then you can get the data one by one until you reach the end of the data. Because actually when you run the select from where, in using the SQL plus, it returns a group of data. But here it's different. Why? Because the difference between host language and SQL language, it will return one by one the data until it reaches the end of the data. That is the basic. You don't have to pay attention to the syntax itself here, but you should understand the mechanism. Then during the practice, you may realize the specific syntax. To do that, how? Actually, the select from where returns as a group. But how this EXEC SQL block handle one by one, record by record. To do that, we have another concept that is called cursor. Cursor is the kind of room allocated in the memory for one SQL statement. If one SQL statement is submitted like a select from where, then one cursor will be served for that statement. Like this is the memory area used in your database, and this is one cursor. Then there is a statement select from where. This is we'll use this cursor, first cursor. Then the Oracle, especially this is called parser. Parse the statement, then allocate the memory area, then your program fetch the data record by record. That is called fetch FEA. Fetch. So by command of fetch, you can get the return data record by record. So that is command for the fetch. After you reach, if you reach the end of the data, end of cursor, then you can close this cursor. So this cursor should be allocated for each statement. Then this one will be one the tuning issues in terms of database administrator. How many cursors are you need concurrently? Okay, the more the better. But if you allocate too much cursor, you do not have enough space for other processing. Okay? So for example, you can allocate 100 cursor or 500 cursor. Sometimes, if there is a malfunction or if the database administrator DBA cannot estimate appropriate number of cursor, you will get the error message like no more cursor in your system. Then you cannot run your application for it. This is one of the very, very frequent error messages. Then, if the database administrator do not know this mechanism, probably call to the customer center, and by calling the customer center, we charge some fee. Also, it takes some time to solve the problem because they issue the ticket and assign some employee in that vendor, then to figure. But after figure out the problem, it's very easy to fix. Just increase the number of the parameter value, then we start. But without understanding of the cursor, you cannot find the solution easily. And dynamic SQL is not very new one, but I'd like to select, there is a application name. So there is the text box to put the social security number and sex, male, female, and age. Sometimes I'd like to put the 1, 2, 3 and checkbox here 40. Okay? Then probably select the F name, L name into, this is EXE similar, into F name, then L name, and where the SSN will be given, SSN, and sex will be given, and age will be given. Then EXECN will be something like that. Okay? But next, I don't care the age, then submit button. Actually, we don't need this one, the age part. If you are using the static SQL in your EXE SQL, you cannot handle this kind of situation. Sometimes the SQL itself is not static, dynamically changing. Sometimes I need only the first name, not the last name. There is an option, what kind of data you want to retrieve. First name, last name, address. There might be check button or checkbox or whatever. Okay? Probably button, check button. Depending on how user choose the option, SQL might be various. Not only the variable, but the pure SQL part will be changeable. To address this problem, we can use the dynamic SQL. Dynamic SQL means, instead of filling out the variable only, we define SQL string, whatever the name is, anyway, string. Then here we put the SQL statement itself. Then we want. Then run, execute this one as a whole. You can see the example here. We can define the SQL statement, like the enter update command. So you can directly put the SQL statement here. Select something from table name, where, something like that. Then there is a command for prepare. Prepare means a parsing. Run the given SQL. Or instead of get the entire SQL as an input, you can make the SQL in your host program, depending on the option. That is called dynamic SQL. Dynamic SQL is more popular than static SQL. Why? It's very flexible. That is a reason. But in terms of performance, which one is better?
Static.
Static, why?
You don't have to generate the string.
String?
Like the dynamic SQL.
Actually, that doesn't cost too much. Do you know the cache? What is the cache? Cache is the data. It's already used in other program. It's in the memory. So if we can access the cache data in the memory, it's much faster than accessing data in hard disk drive. That is the idea. It's the same as in database. To parse and fetch the data. Usually the parsing the SQL is cost. Because you need to check the syntax, you need to check the permission, you need to check where the table. Also, what is that? Query processor needs to check which one is the best. There are so many things to do. So if we can save this process, which means if we have one fixed SQL, then what we need to do is just parsing one time. Then what you need to do is just replace the variable. You don't have to parsing again. You can reuse this parsed data. There is some very specific area in database memory to keep this parsed data for reuse, of course. So you can save the time and resource if you can reuse the cached data. But if you are using dynamic SQL, whenever you got the SQL, you should do everything again, because it's different from previous one, where it doesn't have a where clause. If you have a where clause, you should parse again. So in terms of performance, the static SQL is much faster, much better than dynamic SQL. So if you are database administrator, you need to recommend this one if possible. But I know, as a developer, it's much more flexible. If there is something changed, we don't have to change the code. But in terms of the database performance, you'd better use the static. I get only less than 10% database administrator realize this kind of the difference between the static and dynamic SQL. Also, the advanced database administrator can specify how much different, 10%, 20%. It's totally based on the experience. So if I use the dynamic SQL, probably the 10% or 10 to 15% performance degrade. You can estimate if you know the system very well. In Java, it's a different story, but actually it's the same story. Even though we do not embed the exe block like that, instead we are going to use the libraries or classify. That classify or actually define, did everything. Then you need to do here, the pre-compiler did. So what's the difference between JDBC and ODBC? What is the ODBC? Open Database Connectivity. Then what's the difference between them? Java is for Java. Then for what ODBC is? It's a Microsoft product. From the Microsoft product, it's the same story. There's an impedance mismatch. Microsoft product, except the SQL Server itself, is not directly related to the relational database. So, but still confused, very, very complicated. For example, I'd like to access a relational database from Excel. Excel file, I'd like to get some data. Even though we know this kind of mechanism, actually the Excel provides some API. It's a very simplified Visual Basic. It's Excel Basic, sometimes called. Using Excel Basic, you can access, but there's no way to, if Microsoft provide this kind of mechanism, the Excel will be huge and very, very complicated one. Instead, they provide a common way to access the database from Microsoft product. For example, Excel, Word, any Microsoft, as long as that application created based on the MFC or whatever. There's a kind of gateway. How can you do that? There's actually you can create something. I forgot the name of that. There's a similar as the host string used in C++. You define something ADB. ADB is for Microsoft Excel. From the Microsoft Excel, you predefine, before you connect the database, predefine something, configuration to access the database. To do that, it's totally based on client module of the relational database. For example, Oracle. You need to install Oracle module, then configure here. It's not that easy. We can say this mechanism similar as not the thin server, but the other one in the Java, JDBC. So you should install client module of each DBMS system. So that is the ODBC. Then you can use it. You can call this one instead of the setting, then you can connect the database. Because this one knows everything to connect the database and how to handle the data. That is the ODBC. Anyway, in Java, it's a command to if you are using thin server, in other words, command library classify to connect the database from Java, you're going to have to insert this kind of client module. Because it's a command thing. It includes everything to connect and get the data from the database. Okay, that is called the JDBC. So this is just a simple task. So you can connect the database. There is a specific rule. Oracle JDBC driver and Oracle driver, you should load the JDBC driver, the object. Then connect. I'm not sure. Yes. This is not very good example. I think we will cover the specific syntax during the exercise lab. Okay? So just like the basic step of database programming, you need to define the connection and get the data and close. We will follow the same step. So you will see the exact syntax from the exercise lab. I will mention about SQLJ. Another way, there is actually another way, embedded and object-based. Another way is the core level interface. Actually, this is not popular for general application program. But actually, this is a library. Core level interface means it's a library, C library. Or in other words, it's a low level library. Do you think what kind of program language might be used to develop Oracle? 80% C, 20% assembly. Okay? In other words, there might be a bunch of the library file, object file coded by C. Right? What if we can access that library directly or object file coded by the C when the Oracle is developed? It may be very nice and very fast because there is no other overhead. That is called core level interface. Okay? Looks like system call. Do you know the system call in operating system? System call is the function provided by operating system. So using that system call, you can make the You can develop the program, application program, even the system program. It's the same as here. Code level interface means it's like the system code in operating system. The low level library function. It's a fast and reliable, very good. The only problem is you cannot understand the name because that is not an official interface API provided by each vendor. It's actually main purpose of this one is for develop their own database system. Okay, but some user understand how to use this one, then develop their application program, especially in case of the performance is very, very critical. You don't need any other overhead. So what I'm focusing on is speed to access the data and get the data. So I know some of that, but it's very hard to understand. First, you should understand every mechanism used in the Oracle. So definitely, if you know how to program this one, I think those who know how to use the whole level interface, in Oracle it's called OCI, Oracle Code Interface. So it's not very popular, but there are some job posting that require OCI program. I think it's less than 1% database program. So I implement some of application program used for database administrative job. Like you did already homework what the reorganization. What's the reorganization? It's two different. The extend or space. The best way is download all the data, recreate the table, and upload the data. It takes a long time usually. Even there is some tool. Their mechanism is the same. Download, clear, upload. It takes a long time. To save the time, it's actually simple. Select the data and save somewhere in the host. Then recreate the table and upload the data. So if you can use the core level interface, it's much, much faster. Usually 3 times faster than the normal application. Normal application means something tool or the embedded C or the Java program, JDBC. 3 to 4 times faster. But the length is so huge. It's more than 2,000, because even you cannot recognize which one is for each. There is no select, there is nothing. The only thing you can realize is the table name and the column name. That's the only one. I think the developer in Oracle or each vendor, they try to hide their function. So they use very encrypted name. So we did actually the test one sample program based on OCI year ago, but after we changed the interface, the Oracle is reinstalled in Windows-based system. We cannot do anymore this. So this is just the information. So as you can see, I think you cannot understand the name of this one. There's some SQL, HS, PMP. We don't know what that means. Then another one is, in the previous example, after you select the data, there is if then else. Actually, those kind of logic is not the standard in SQL. There is no if then else or for loop or while loop. But to address problem, the DBMS provide the full procedure that can implement some logic, which is similar used in the host language. Any program language, procedural language, has a for loop or while loop. Others, if then else, if then else, if else, if something like that. You can DBMS mimic those kind of functions in database stored procedure. Okay, Oracle is called PL SQL, procedural language in SQL. Informatics, they use the similar name, but stored procedure, SPL, something like that. Stored procedural language, SPL. DB2, they has their own name, but I cannot remember. So anyway, general term is stored procedure. Advantage, make easy to code. And problem, it's not standard. Each DBMS has their own syntax. Also, there might be overhead. So sometimes those who knows how to use the stored procedure, it looks like very good. So use too much stored procedure. Then it makes your host program simple. Why? The logic is implemented in SQL, so your host program might be very, very simple. You don't have to put the if then else or any condition. The problem is too much overhead in database. Sometimes, as you know, database is a software running on the operating system, which means there might be overhead to run the database. If you can run that condition in your host language much faster, C is the fastest one. That is the reason still C or C++ is popular to verify the algorithm. When you have a new algorithm, you can verify using the C or C++. MATLAB is very good. It's very easy to implement something, but MATLAB is another application running on the operating system. So they're too much overhead, too slow. So that's the disadvantage. For example, there is a name procedure, create procedure. Another way to use the stored procedure is create function. What is the difference? Procedure and function. Function has a return value. Procedure is nothing but procedure. You provide something procedure. That's it. So you can create a procedure or function that it can be called by in your SQL. Like I'd like to create a function to generate a GPA. Input is the social security number, output is GPA. Okay? Then how to use that function in your SQL, like select GPA and social security number from student. That's it. You don't have to where group by or whatever. You don't have to do that here. GPA function is implemented already. So how to create? There is a certain rule. I think the informatics use the PSM, persistent stored procedure module. This is one example. Create function, department size. Input is the department number, output is probably number of employees. You can implement using pure SQL by adapting the group by, okay, and having function. Can you understand? Without using the function, this function, you can do the same thing using select, from where, group by, and having. How can we make the function here? Select, count, from is the nested SQL, right? In Oracle, it's called inline view. So you can implement if then else is here. Also, this is a variable. So this variable should be declared in the declare part. Function has the return value, so you should keep that value in the return. Procedure does not. So that is the only difference. Then that's the summary. That's the whole thing of the programming. During the exercise lab, we will test the POSIT and JDBC and stored procedure. Also some trigger. We covered trigger last time, but we didn't exercise it. So next, is it next class? The Thursday? Yes. It's the Thursday. Next Tuesday, we will have another exercise lab to cover the database programming. It will be very, very, very helpful. Even though we do not cover the database programming based on what you are using in your project, like most of you use the .NET and SQL Server because they are very close. So it's easy to, you don't have to worry about those kind of configuration like the ODBC or JDBC or something, because there might be some object to connect the database, especially with the Microsoft product. So I know most of the team use the SQL Server as well as any Microsoft oriented program, .NET or C# whatever is fine. But actually inside that, Microsoft implement the same thing that we have learned today. So we will cover those exercises in the program on the next class. It will be very interesting. Then you can start right away for your last page for your project. It will be in application developed. So, any questions regarding to the database programming and your project? Okay, so see you on Tuesday.